Extensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Scarlett Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell. Here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast with Mike Regan and John Tucker filling in today for Tim Stenovic and Carol Masser. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms as we parse the most crucial moments of the day and, quite frankly, on the week. And we should point out, Mike, 6 straight weeks now of gains for the S&P 500 unless something really crazy happens in the next minute and a half.
Yeah, that's quite a stretch of gains, Romaine. And really the leadership of this rally today is pretty interesting. You know, we're not talking about defensive stocks. We're talking about energy, tech, consumer discretionary, commodity stocks. So really those cyclical stocks. So really telling me, Scarlett, that the market is viewing this jobs report as sort of an eco-bullish type of scenario, that we will get that soft landing. At least that's the vibe of the market at the moment. Who knows what next week brings, but we do see oil jumping a little bit after that big plunge in oil we've seen over the last few weeks. So back above $70 a barrel.
We also see risk assets like Bitcoin above $44,000. It had declined the previous 2 days, but it's back to its winning streak.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you talk about the moves that we saw in the commodity space. At one point, I mean, oil had a huge downdraft over the last couple of days, clawing back some of those losses today, up by about 3% here. But again, it adds to this idea here that you do have divergent views of economic conditions. Consumer spending might be holding up, but that industrial activity, at least for right now, globally, not doing so as well. All right, we are getting the closing bells here in New York. So let's start to walk you through the numbers here on the day and on the week. It is green across the screen on the day, and that's going to be just about enough to also give us weekly gains across the board. The Dow Jones Industrial Average higher on the day by about 129 points, or roughly about 3 to 4% here on the day. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 is going to close higher by about 18 points, back at that 4,600 level, higher on the day by about 0.4%. The NASDAQ Composite higher by about 64 points, or about 0.5% here on the day. And let's take a quick look at the Russell 2000. The Russell 2000 are going to finish out with about a 0.7% gain on the day. Now, we should point out all 4 of those major averages that I just gave you there higher on the week, though the Dow Jones Industrial Average only higher by a tenth of a percent. So wait for those numbers to settle to see if we can put that one in the history books.
And Romaine, there's one mover I've been dying to talk to Scarlett about, because I think of Scarlett Fu as sort of our chief gossip correspondent, chief celebrity gossip correspondent.
Go on.
And it's Roblox. Have you seen this yet, Scarlett? I don't know if your sons are on Roblox.
Yes, much to my disappointment.
It's basically, for those who are unfamiliar, you know, it's a video game platform, but there's also a big social media element to it. And the big gain today, 2.5% for Roblox, Scarlett, is because apparently Nicki Minaj has joined the platform, or at least someone pretending to be Nicki Minaj. And it's
I like how you qualified that.
Got everyone excited.
But, you know, is the Roblox audience Nicki Minaj target customer? I'm not sure. Or target listener?
That's a good question. I don't know. You have to ask your sons tonight when you get home.
Okay, that'll be a good talking point. Let's just go to the sector performances for a moment here. Put aside Nicki Minaj and take a look at how the 24 industry groups did on this day. You have consumer durable and apparel companies leading the gains. That's really Lululemon. Chip companies also adding more than 1%. And banks bringing up the rear in terms of the top 3. On the downside, you've got household and personal products losing 0.9%. Telecom services and transportation stocks in the red as well.
One of the big gainers on the day, in fact, let's just go ahead and call it, I believe it was the biggest gainer in the S&P 500, was Paramount Global. Those shares higher on the day by about 12% here. That was on the back of a report that Skydance and Redbird might be looking to buy the company. Not quite sure where we stand right now, but Felix Gillette over at Bloomberg News says any negotiations going on right now would be in the very preliminary stages. But the fact that we now know that it is actually on the block, definitely something to keep an eye on. Dollar General shares, though, moving in the opposite direction here on the day and on the week, going to be down about 3 to 4% on the day and about 5% on a weekly basis. But I want you to flip it up here, because I thought that was interesting to see how much strength that we saw this day and, quite frankly, this week in some of the travel names. Norwegian Cruise Line shares finished the day lower on the day, which is fine, because on a weekly basis, it did manage to gain 14%. That matched the gain that it had last week, which was about 14% as well. In fact, all of the travel stocks, and I mean all of them, all of the cruise lines, and almost all of the airlines now having phenomenal runs, with most of these names, particularly in the airline space, either trading at 52-week highs and in some cases all-time highs, with one big exception, and that is Alaska Airlines, ALK. Those shares have been under pressure all week long, and that was largely because of the concerns coming out of Monday about its purchase of Hawaiian Airlines. Of course, that deal has a long way to go before it actually gets done, but that 14% drop that we saw on Monday, that continued today with another 1% drop, and that led to a massive weekly drop for that airline name, the only drop amongst the airlines.
Yeah, and maybe there's concern that it overpaid as well as a pretty hefty premium to Hawaiian Holdings. I just want to add another decliner there, and it also has to do with M&A. Let's jump ahead to Honeywell, because Honeywell is buying the security unit of Carrier for $4.95 billion. The deal is expected to be immediately accretive to growth, gross margins and operating margins, but as is usually the case with these M&A deals, the acquirer is getting seeing a decline, whereas the target is getting a nice boost. Carrier, of course, getting a rise on the day. Let me just bring up another one that we have been looking at. Restoration Hardware, or RH as it's known now, down 14%, biggest decline in 3 months. You go back to that consumer spending picture and what it looks like, Romain. As much as the airline stocks and the cruise stocks have recovered lately, they had been under pressure for a while, especially those airline stocks, on this idea that people were holding back on spending after a crazy summer in which they just blew out their budgets.
Yeah, and the RH thing, I mean, we pay so much attention to RH because it almost kind of by default became a barometer, at least for a certain level of spending. And even to that extent, obviously the commentary that we would get out of the CEO. But I mean, we know those big ticket items. We've seen a big scale back there, but when, if at all, do we start to see that scale back in other areas? Like I said, take a look at the airline index and you're talking about fresh highs there. You take a look at cruise lines, fresh highs there. You even take a look at things like restaurant stocks also doing well, not quite at highs, but certainly showing a lot of strength. All right, let's take a look at what's going on in the yield space too, because of course that has been the flip-flop from day to day as we go back from rally to sell-off. And today here, it was pretty much a sell-off across the board here, pushing yields higher, particularly on the shorter end of the curve, 12 basis points higher on the 2-year, 11 basis points on the 5-year, smaller moves on the longer end of the curve, but overall a shift higher on the yield.
Yeah, maybe we're back to that scenario where good news is actually good news at this point. And did anybody notice the S&P 500 for the year just shy of the 20% mark? It's worth also noting that the NASDAQ year to date 37% higher.
Yeah,
take that.
That's right, and that's is a new high for the year for the S&P 500, and in fact the highest since March of 2022. So if you round up, it's almost a 2-year high soon. But I can't sort of get past the idea of how this is an unusual day in the market, since we do have this spike higher in yields, the dollar's higher, oil's higher, and equities are all higher together. So Scarlett, that's a lot of sort of conflicting signals for the market here. I can't help but wonder if that's Santa Claus rally might be starting a little early, and equity investors are really not paying attention to the other signals in the market and just trying to dress those windows for the year-end letters that fund managers have to sell to.
Have you talked to Santa Claus about this rally?
I've been a bad boy. He won't answer.
Ask him why correlations are breaking down. I'm sure that'll be the first thing he wants to answer.
Yeah, he loves that when you corner him when he comes down the chimney eating those cookies and you start asking him about the dot plot. And he just stares blankly at you and is like, dude, I just deliver toys.
I'm a delivery service. One thing that we should mention, since you brought up yields earlier, Romain, is we do have Treasury auctions next week, and it's going to be a lot in supply, $108 billion, in addition to the FOMC meeting sandwiched in between two big sales. So that's going to put some pressure on yields as well to move them higher, at least keep them at these elevated levels.
What can he say? What can Jay Powell say, Mike Regan, next week that is going to change anybody's mind? I mean, we know he's not going to, come out and definitively say we're done hiking rates or we're, ready for rate cuts or anything else. So I kind of wonder what's left. I mean, the data speaks for itself.
Well, and speaking of data, there is one more potential curveball to come for Jay Powell next week, and that is the actual CPI report expected on the 12th. Economists looking for a little bit of a pickup month over month from 0.2% to 0.3%, but on a year over year basis, they do expect it to come back down from 3.2% to 3.1%. So still a little hot, Romain, but moving in the right direction if these economists' estimates are correct.
All right, Mike, we will talk to you on Monday. John, we'll talk to you as well. Can you actually start practicing on what you're going to draw for us next week.
I thought that was a pretty good rendering.
It was actually
I mean,
it was better than I think what most people can do.
That's the best Taylor Swift drawing.
You got a second career there. You'll see him at Christie's or Sotheby's sometime in the future as we wrap up our cross-platform coverage of the market close on Bloomberg Television, Radio, and YouTube. And a reminder: Bloomberg Business Week is now on Bloomberg Originals. We'll be back tomorrow at the same. We'll be back on Monday at the same time and the same place. All right, coming up here.